Welcome everybody. I do got to say real quick, I got a text from Kerry Arnold. Unfortunately, he has a work-related issue that he has to do some work stuff. So I apologize for that. But hey, life is life, man. Work is work. It is what it is. You know, I got off work just 45 minutes ago. So, you know, it is what it is. So I want to thank Jeff Harding to come on. I want to thank Big Biff. Ugh. See, you can tell I just got off of work. Connor on. Now, let me introduce these guys just in case some of you don't know them. I know most of you know them, but just in case. If you don't know Bigfoot Anon, I call him the young gun. I call him like the future of the Bigfoot community. Like he's the kind of guy that's learning, sponging, listening to everybody. You know, he's molding his own style and system, but he's doing it by listening and learning. And he's constantly writing books, reading books, articles. He just wants to get all that knowledge. So he's not trying to be another kind of research. He wants to be his own, but he's taking bits and pieces from everybody. Okay. Now on the top is Jeff Harding, has a brand new channel called Pine Island Research. And he represents trying to teach people techniques that have been used, techniques maybe to try. Different people coming into the channel, sharing information with everybody, and it's kind of like an educated kind of a learning class. Shit, I had a great time in the chat yesterday. Shit, I mean, I don't know if Jeff was reading some of the stuff in the chat. Some of the stuff in the chat
on Moses' channel, or
no, your channel.
Mine. Okay.
Yep. Some of us in the chat, we were talking how the hair bands went over to Russia for the first time in the world and broke the barriers, and those bands don't get enough credit. We were talking about that in your chat.
Listen, had I known about that, I probably would have changed the whole subject of the show, because I love delving into that subject. So.
It was fantastic. It was fun. So, guys, the reason this title is called "Can DNA Prove the Existence of Bigfoot?" And the reason I wanted to talk about this is actually I was inspired by Connor's video about when they went on this expedition at the Stacy's brown thing, and you guys found a piece of brown hair. I think you guys were having a show, I think Squatch in South Florida today. I was working, so I didn't get to see it, so I don't know what the results are. But what I want to ask you two is we all know most of the evidence that we get are usually some kind of a video or a picture that could be easily debunked, fake or real, doesn't matter. To the public's eye, I'm talking about the public's eye. We all believe in Bigfoot, but to the average public's eye, a picture and a video, they're always going to debunk. I mean, that's the public. Now, DNA, right? DNA is, most people know what DNA is, but just in case you don't, DNA is a self-replicating material that is present in nearly all living organisms as the main constituent of chromosomes. It is a carrier of genetic information. So DNA, every year, DNA is getting better and better, right? It's getting better and better. I mean, now the people who were in prison are getting out of prison because the DNA is freeing them, and the people who are guilty, the DNA is putting the real people behind prison. So DNA is getting better, right? We got ancestry now where you can spit in a bottle. Now you can build your family tree as long as people spit in bottles too. You can do a whole family tree ancestry. So every year DNA is getting better and better and better. Now, do you guys think to finally prove to the public that Bigfoot is real, you think DNA could do that?
You asking me what I think?
Yeah.
I spent 37 weeks paddling 8.5 miles one way and 8.5 miles back. And then the next day, 8.5 miles one way and 8.5 miles back, twice a week for 37 weeks, which if you do the math, I paddled over 1,000 miles this summer to collect DNA. I mean, it's so I wouldn't have done it if I didn't think that it had the ability to do that. But to back it up a second, when you're talking about evidence, I mean, it's important for people to understand that what we look for as researchers for evidence is usually categorized in, I used to say 4 categories, but really it's 5. Photo or video, something you can look at. And oftentimes that's accompanied by audio, but I consider audio its own. If I get video that has an audio track on it, I analyze them both separately. Okay. And then you've got castings, and then you've got DNA. Now that's the 4 categories, but the 5th one would be encounters. I mean, if it's coming from credible sources, who the backstory and the vetting and people like Steve Coles or Doug Hychek really reads the whole backstory behind it and everything fits, that you could be talking about encounters being real too. Now, I'm not the type of person that says every encounter is real. People misidentify stuff, and people will embellish stuff. And as much as I love to listen to 1,000 episodes of Sasquatch Chronicles, after hearing them, I tell you maybe half of them are bullshit. I don't know.
Probably 70%.
Well, it could be. But I'm not going to be the one who judges that. I'm just telling you, I'm not naive enough to believe that they're all real. Okay, so it's hard to look at an encounter as being evidence, but if you do enough background checking and really get into the credibility and the details of it, I think there are encounters out there that could be considered evidence. But back to the DNA part, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of misperceptions about DNA and what that technology and science is capable of. Hopefully we can cover a little bit about that tonight and what, because everybody talks about eDNA and DNA, and they speak those words having a loose grasp of what they understand what it is in your body that identifies you, right? But understanding the science and what it's capable of and what you can analyze and what really doesn't analyze well for samples. So a lot out there that people really aren't aware of. And I wasn't aware of it at first till I started dealing with DNA scientists that are working with Legend Meat Science too. I've got one of them coming on my show on the end of December. His name is Darby Orcutt, and he's a DNA scientist that is heading up the whole LMS2 analyzation of all the DNA that's going to be on that documentary. And he's the head of the science part of North Carolina State. And they've got one of the most advanced labs in the country that analyzes DNA.
See, that's important because I'm thinking to myself, I'm a common person. And let's just say, kind of like Connor and them, I go in the woods and I found a piece of hair that I think this is not horse. Mm-hmm. It's not a vegetable, fruit. First thing in my mind is, first of all, who would I send it to, I mean what place can I send it? And I'm sure to do a real good DNA test, it costs money. Now, I don't know how much. I don't know how much it costs. Maybe you guys know an average price.
It's about $5,000 to break it down to the mitochondrial DNA level. And if you want to break it down to a nuclear level, it's about double that. But I mean, retail price. If you went into a lab and said, here's a hair, that's what you're going to pay. Fortunately, we aren't paying retail prices when we're bringing a bunch of samples to a lab that's really dedicated to wanting to solve the answer as much as we are,
And here's another thing that goes through my mind. Okay, now if you think of ancestry, whatever, if I do DNA, my family members all do it, and then you can identify, and you can put, you can build your family tree. Now, Bigfoot's not standing in line, spitting in the cups to ancestry. So say you got something. Say it is Bigfoot. Let's just say, for example, you do got Bigfoot. I mean, without enough Bigfoot's DNA, even in the first place, what's going to come back on the piece of paper? Like unidentified? I mean,
it just depends on the sample, first of all. And I'll just kind of approach this step by step when we talk about different things you could do a DNA test on, okay? Most accurate would be blood. Okay, your
Yeah,
blood,
that's the
your
best.
DNA, that's the easiest to test. If I test 100 samples, I will get 100 returns on DNA tests on what the DNA of that blood is. Spit, obviously it works for ancestry. It's fresh. You're spitting it in there and capping it off. It's not getting contaminated. I don't know where Bigfoot would leave spit or drool out there that doesn't get exposed to the elements and other animals and insects and things before you'd get a sample of that. But, typically saliva would work well. Hair samples are a little bit misconstrued. Hair samples are hit and miss. About every other hair sample, you can get a good DNA analysis out of it. About half of them you can't. And I know that sounds crazy, but if I pulled one of Connor's, 2-foot long hairs out and I tested it, you'd probably get a hit on it. But I just pulled it right out of the follicle, right out of his head. Okay. Now, if I find it snagged on a piece of tree bark and it's 3 years old, there's a good chance I won't get a DNA hit on it. So the samples that I collected, I'm hoping that we're going to run about 60 or 70% success. But, that's because I was getting them to interact with items that they were leaving it on. So I can assume that it's fairly fresh. If you find a sample on a picnic table or on a piece of tree bark, you really don't know how old it is, right? So that's a little bit more hit and miss. It can be a coin toss. And when you're talking 10 grand to analyze one, are you going to do it on a coin toss?
That's the thing.
That's
so
a little hard.
You're never going to get enough DNA.
If you were to call Doug Hycheck and say, hey, you don't know me, but I've got a hair sample, right? He's got 100 questions he's going to ask you about that. Where'd you collect it at? What was the weather like? What does it look like? Send me pictures of all this stuff before he even has you put it in an envelope and put a stamp on it. He's got a whole laundry list of questions because he's going to determine whether or not it's worth testing or not. Now, samples that you've collected because you trapped them or you baited them to be left are a little bit more investable, let's say. They're a little bit better investment than somebody who says, I found a hair, okay? And it's not because the found hair might not be Bigfoot. It's because the found hair, we don't know how old it is. We don't know what kind of elements it's been exposed to. And so, that weighs in a lot in determining, are you going to test a hair or not? I shared last night on Moses' show, one of the easiest ways somebody can test or try to trap fresh hair samples is if you've got a fence line that has fence posts every 6 feet, right? And then there's an end to that fence line, not a corner, but an end where you can walk around it, right? And you've got a wooden post that's like that round. What I would do is take a 2-inch round or square piece of Velcro and either staple it or screw it right into the top of that post. Because what happens on that end post, when you walk around that fence, you put your hand on the post as you go around the corner, or you put your arm on it. It's just natural for a bipedal person like a person to do that. Now, if I can't believe that there's any reason why Bigfoot wouldn't do the same. If he's walking along a fence because he doesn't want to crawl under it or jump over it, it's just 20 yards up to get to the end of it. When he walks around that end post, he might put his hand on it and you might get a hair sample that way. Now, if you put a piece of Velcro there and every couple of weeks you go back and pretty soon you got an 8-inch long hair hanging off of it, I can tell you what it's not. It's not a deer. It's not a raccoon. It's something that walked by. It's either human or it's Bigfoot. I mean, there ain't a whole lot of in between that would leave a hair in that spot. So it's a high value kind of way to do it. What's the investment? It's $1 piece of Velcro at Walmart, right? Why not try it? If you call me and said, I got a hair, and I say, how'd you get it? And you tell me that's how you got it, I'm like, holy shit, we got to look at that piece of hair. Because that's interesting. So it's just thinking outside of the box a little bit. You guys are used to that. You guys aren't in the box type of guys. You what area of paranormal you're talking about, you're thinking outside the box. That's what you got to do.
The price tag, $5,000, like you said, not every person.
Well, here's the deal. There's another step of vetting that we do. So let's say you pass the whole threshold of, this is a hair we want to look at, and you send it to us. The other thing I'm going to look at is microscopically, a human hair, the scale pattern around the shaft. So if this is a piece of hair, okay, the scale pattern around the diameter of the shaft will be 6 to 7 scales on a human. 6 or 7. It's never less, it's never more. I don't care what color your hair is, what nationality you are, it's 6 or 7 scales. Most what we believe to be Sasquatch samples are 5 scales. There's 5 scale pattern around that hair. Now, there's other animals that have 5 scales too, but I'm just telling you, it's a way for me to eliminate that it's human. If that hair, just looking at it under a microscope for free, by the way, shows that it's 5 scales, I now know it's not human hair. Now I feel better about putting it into a lab and investing it. If it's 6 or 7 scales, we're not going to do that. So that's just another vetting level. Once you pass the whole, how did we get it? Yeah, it sounds like that could be a likely scenario. Now we go, is it 5 or 6 or 7 scales? If it's 5 scales and not 6 or 7, now we go to the next step, and that's where we go into the lab with it.
Now, let's say, Jeff, we do have a Bigfoot hair. You know, we know it's a hair, but with all the ones you've done, is there like a pattern that you're trying to look for within that DNA? Because we got plenty of human DNAs to test by, but you know, it's not like we have tons of Bigfoot's DNA to.
So that's the meat and potatoes of the conversation. What I see in people's reactions to DNA and how it could advance the science in this mystery is that it's useless until you have a dead one that you can say, this is what we're comparing them all to. That's not true. Okay. What we're going to do is take regionally from different parts of North America. If you have 100 hairs, and let's say you can get at least 8 of them to test properly on a nuclear level for DNA, you're going to slot 8 of those in a category. Here's number 1, here's number 2, here's number 3. The genomes broke down and they all compare. They're all from the same thing, right? They all look identical. They're all unknown primate, part human DNA. Let's say that's what they show, okay? Whether you got 8 of them or whether you got 100 of them, I don't care where they came from. I don't care if you don't know what the unknown primate is. What I care about is, does number 1 match number 2, and number 2 match number 3, and number 3 match number 4 through 8 samples or more. If you can get 8 of them to break down to the genomes are identical and they're collected in different areas of North America and they're all showing the same species, you have base mapped a species unrecognized in science. Now, you might not know what it is. You got to call it species X.
Yep.
And it will always be species X until you have that dead body. But that doesn't mean that you can't base map it and show that there is an existing bipedal primate with part human DNA out there that exists all over the country. I don't need a body to show that. If I can get enough hairs to show that those DNA traits are all identical, and typically what we've come down to is if we could get 8 of them and break them down to a nuclear level and they're all collected in different areas, you've done that. You've accomplished it. You have enough data there to say there is a species X, it's a bipedal, part human DNA composition that exists in North America. Whether you want to call it Sasquatch, Bigfoot, skunk ape, Sabe, whatever, call it what you want. But there's something there that exists out there and it's real. Now, until you have a dead one, you can't say, here's what all those hair samples are. But that doesn't mean without a dead one, those hair samples aren't representing a living species in North America. That's what it would do. So that's the whole goal here, is I don't care if it's an unknown species or an unknown match or an unknown primate part human, wherever they normally have quit analyzing and throw it away, like we can't figure it out. I want to base map them and say, does number 1 match number 17? And down the road, when number 124 is tested, they put that in that base map and say, number 124 matches, 124 matches them all. And now number 125 does. And we keep adding to that base map of exact same genomes broke down. And even if they ended up differing slightly, let's say the skunk ape that you never hear is over 8 foot tall is a little bit different than that 10 foot, 1,200 pounds Sasquatch in Canada, right? They probably are about really close. There might be some small differences, right? Same way Ancestry can tell if you're Asian and from Malaysia or Thailand, and they can tell if I'm Welsh and my family came from Wales. We're still humans. We still look the same, but they can actually tell where you came from, right? Those differences might exist in Bigfoot DNA, but we don't have a library of, if we could start getting Washington ones to show up a little different than Florida ones, and you start getting a number of each, you might start seeing the pattern of where they differ slightly. But the trick is we need 8 good hairs from 8 different areas to map it that are all unknown primate. They're unknown species with part human DNA in them. And I don't need a body. I've already shown there is something living out there, and science can't deny that at that point. That's what our goal is.
I want to show people the video clip that actually inspired me on this. It's from Connor. I put this on my breaking news. And this is what kind of made me start thinking about the hair. And then I'll go with Connor and ask him about this. Here, let me play this for you guys.
Same color, but it's not like this.
And what confounds right here, there's hair stuck to the rough part of the stem.
Oh my God. All right, see, and now this is why I would need my plastic bag and gloves. Exactly.
I have some.
Yeah, I have some in my bag too.
Okay, what is
We're talking about that, and then it's
Oh,
stuck
that's
on the
coconut
table
stuff.
here.
That's
You think
bark.
so?
Yeah.
Okay. What do you think it is?
Bark. Like
Okay,
the
I
bark
don't
when you
know.
feel the-
Okay.
We're low testing
I don't
skin.
know.
That I don't know.
Yeah, that is definitely that's the
Yeah,
coconut.
and
Yeah, but we brought that over here to kind of compare it to
Oh,
that.
okay, that.
We found the over there.
Now, Jeff, I heard her say we brought this over here to compare it. Now, what you're seeing there, are they doing it, in your opinion?
I am familiar with this because
that's why I brought it up. I
Congressman
know
who
you're
found
familiar
that,
with
he
it.
had contacted me and said, "Do you want to look at this hair?" And so, basically they had compared it to different things. I like coconut fiber and plant fibers that they found in the area. And does it look the same? And they determined that it didn't look the same. Really, at this point, part of me looks at this, and I'm not saying this from a personal level. I certainly don't want to offend anybody because I understand how hopeful and how excited you get when you find something you really feel is good evidence. But the location of this, my main concern is it human hair? Now, I get that it maybe doesn't seem likely that it is, but it's a picnic table in a park, okay? We can't deny that. So before I'd stick it in the lab, what I'd do is tell them, mail it to me, and let's see if it's got a 5-scale structure around it, okay? Because if it's got a 5-scale structure around the shaft of the hair, and we can show that it's not plant fiber or wood fiber, that it is actually a animal hair that has a core in it, now all of a sudden you start thinking, well, if it's got 5-scale pattern around, we know it's not human. Okay. And then we start looking at different animals in that area. I don't know how long these hairs were, but geez, if you got a 7 or 8 inch long hair, it's likely not from a raccoon, or something like that. So, it really comes down to that tiered level of vetting, the story. When you find hair versus when you collect hair off of an object that you put out there with the intention of collecting it, found hair, again, you wonder how old it is. Then again, you look at this and say it's hanging on a picnic table. How long could it have hung there before somebody else would have pulled it off? Likely the next person to sit down there and eat would have pulled it off. So, it's probably not older than a week or two.
Now, is it my understanding that Connor, that hair was sent to Jeff, or what's the story about that hair right now? I didn't get to catch the videos today.
He asked me if he wanted me to send it, if I wanted him to send it to me. And I wanted to put Doug in charge of that because I want Doug to talk to him and go through his list of questions and stuff rather than me saying, Doug, we need to do this. And unfortunately, Doug has had like three conventions back to me. He just got back from Vegas
It's
from the
convention
big
time, yeah.
paranormal one, down in Vegas. And we're probably finally, as we're going into Christmas break, have gotten to a point where I will contact him back and say, let's get you to mail it up here so we can look at it. I'll tell him how to, process it and ship it to us. But, it's really, like I say, it's almost more like the story and how you collect it is so important. I know that sucks for a lot of people because if you find one, you're like, I really want to know, right? I mean, I just want to know what this came from. The story and how you get it, if you're going to tell me I found it on a piece of tree bark, I'll give you an example. In Doug's area, he's not far from me up here in northern Minnesota, but he's got an area that has a clearing cut through the forest 100 years ago. And they've got these huge, like 3-foot round highline poles that go up this fire cut, okay? And these things are soaked in creosote like railroad ties, so they don't rot. And they're very rough. I mean, if you rubbed your hand down one, you're going to have 100 splinters in your hand. They are rough. They're not smooth. And they're collecting samples of clumps of 10, 12 hairs that are 8 foot up that are stuck in these things. Okay. That's not a bear. That's not any animal that would leave it that high because these samples are 8 to 10 inches long. It's something that's a 10-foot tall, something that's up there scratching its back or its shoulders on this real rough pole because it feels good when they do it. I don't know how else you get hair 8 foot up on a pole like that, right? So, I mean, even if a bear did it, it's not 8 to 10 inch long hair. Bears don't have hair that long.
Well,
so when we look at it and there's 5 scales around it, and all of a sudden we're like, holy shit, we got to put this in the lab, right? But because of where it was left, that plays a whole lot into the validity of how much do you want to invest in finding out the answer.
That makes sense. Now, Connor, when you saw it, what was going through your mind when you actually saw it? What do you think it is?
I was super excited because we were down in Mayaca, which is the skunk ape capital of the state, of course. There was one shot in 1994, and then the famous pictures that were sent to the Sarasota Police Department. So, of course, we were all excited. It was the Stacy Brown campout. We actually found footprints a little earlier. There was a couple false alarm footprints, and then we actually did find a bear footprint that kind of made its rounds. It was a very cool morning. But then after getting zapped by some kind of infrasound, Matt from Squatch in South Florida and Nana Boss came upon the hair on the picnic table. And like Jeff said, it is a picnic table in a park. The Boy Scouts do use that area quite often for training and using like tactical skills out in gathering and a bunch of, outdoor stuff. Matt and Tim T did an awesome video today that they actually did just put it under a microscope. So I would love for Jeff and other people that know a little bit more about DNA just to even check that out. And I'm sure we could get a fair assessment. But either way, it's an awesome discovery. I just want to see what other people think about it. I'm not throwing all my poker chips in one way or the other. The discovery was amazing that day, and it was on to the next day. But it was awesome, interest and passion for all of it. And then the fact that Jeff is doing the same work up in the north part of the country, and I've seen Tennessee hair, and then it linked up with Tim T's hair. So like Jeff said, we're on to something. And when he can get 8 samples that are confirmed by 3 different labs from all across America, again, we have some type of confirmation, and we have to build that upon ourselves in this underground community. And I think it will become official in no time.
Well, I have reasons to think that hair samples would look differently in different parts of the country. Okay. And that's based on climate. And one of the things that I would say is when we work in research from a research standpoint, when we're looking at something, trying to explain how we feel about it or develop a theory on what we're seeing, especially if we're seeing it more than once, we don't operate in definities, unfortunately. I wish we could. We have to look at, here's 5 possibilities, what's least likely and what's most plausible. Okay? So you start with the process of elimination. It's very unlikely it would be this, so we get rid of that. And we start seeing what do we have left at the end of that analysis, right? So when I see a picnic table and I see that, I got to ask myself, could somebody have been having lunch with their kids and they were having hot dogs and their golden retriever jumped up to eat half a hot dog left on a plate and its long belly hair got snagged on the edge of the table? You know, is that likely? I don't know if it's likely, but I can't throw it into the that it's very unlikely category. I could easily, it's plausible that could happen, you know. But if you told me, well, I put a piece of Velcro on top of a fence post, I got to say, dude, it's very unlikely that isn't a high value specimen. That's likely a bipedal. It's either a human or it's a Bigfoot, you know? I mean, so you start analyzing stuff in that whole, that what's most plausible, what's likely, what's unlikely, and what's least likely, you know, to get to those stages. What happens is when you fall in the middle, like this, like that's kind of where I'd put this one. It looks real. I can't say it's unlikely that other scenarios could exist where something long-haired could snag hair on it, okay? That's where I'm tripped up. But that doesn't mean that I won't take the time to tell you to send it to us so we can see if it's got a 5-scale pattern around. Because if it does, now we look at, does a golden retriever have a 5-scale pattern? Does, you know, what... And once we've compared the visual references that we can see under a microscope, then we determine, do we put it in a lab? Does it appear to have a lack of medulla core? Is it a very limp piece of hair? But here's where you start running into issues here. I again, going to the most plausible, okay? I have to try to explain things beyond just sometimes what I'm seeing. I have to try to reason or make reason of it, okay? And here's what I end up with at the end of the day. And people can believe, I'm not stating this as a fact. This is simply my opinion. But a Bigfoot that is in the northern part of the country, meaning north of the Mason-Dixon line, where it snows and where it gets cold, where there's more vast areas of wilderness. Okay, not that there isn't thick jungle in Florida. It's just in Florida, it's hard to find an area where you can walk more than 20 miles and not run into a convenience store at some point. I mean, there's thick cover, but it's not like thousands of square miles of thick cover. Okay, so they exist likely in smaller groups, meaning it makes sense that there's 2 or 3 in a clan versus 8 or 9. Okay, I don't know that 8 or 9 can exist in thick cover that's not really vast and expansive. Maybe they can, but I get why maybe there's only 2 or 3 in there or 4. Whereas up north, what do you have for apex predators up north that they'd have to be defensive of versus Florida? Florida, you got crocodiles or alligators. I mean, you've got snakes. Okay. I get that, but one Bigfoot can stomp the head in on an alligator. It's not like it needs 10 of them to ward it off. Whereas up north, you get a pack of 10 wolves coming after you. Be very hard for one of them. I don't care how big it is to defend itself. So when you start looking at grizzly bears and packs of wolves, you start realizing why maybe they would be in clans of 7, 8, or 9. To be able to defend against that. And maybe they would be better at working together and communicating. The 3 of us can have fairly bad communication skills and still do a project together. But if you have 8 or 9 people doing a project together, boy, where the drama comes from somebody, right? So now when you're up north and you've got 8 or 9 of them in a clan, they kind of depend on each other more. They can't exist alone. They can't defend against those apex predators. So They need each other really bad, and they're good at communicating. And that's kind of my theory. So when somebody says, well, the ones down south seem more aggressive, well, they probably don't exist in clans of 8, 9, or 10 normally. They don't need to get along with everybody. They're easily agitated. You know what I mean? Versus one that has to exist in a bigger community, they might not be as easily agitated.
But
I
technically,
mean, it's just basic.
it is.
I look at how humans exist, and why would it be any different, right?
But technically, how will we know if, like you said, they're more aggressive here? It's not like we're walking up to Bigfoots every single state. I mean,
No. But let's consider this. One that lives up in the north where it gets 0 degrees and 30-mile-an-hour winds. So now you got 30 below wind chill and stuff like that. What do they need differently than one down south? They need to be bigger, thicker,
more fat.
We see that in white-tailed deer. If I shoot a deer in Alabama, it might have an impressive rack on its head. If it's a 6.5-year-old buck at full maturity, it's going to be a nice deer. But the full size is probably 180 pounds max. And up here in northern Minnesota, or especially over in the Dakotas, in Montana, where they're corn-fed, Iowa and Kansas, a 6.5-year-old buck will weigh 280 pounds. I mean, it's 35% more body mass. And yet, if we look at the genome, the genetic makeup on DNA, they're the same white-tailed deer. There's little differences in strains, but for the most part, they're the same animal, same species. So when I look down south and say, why would most of your reports not really exceed 8 foot? I mean, 8 foot is a big one down south, right? Up north, you hear 10 foot, 9 foot, 10 foot. The body mass is like on a 10 foot is like 1,200 pounds, 1,000 to 1,200 pounds up here. Most of your southern ones that are 8 foot and seem to be full grown males, the reports are like 750, 800 pounds, Well, if you were to live in that kind of cold and have to exist in that, the amount of calories you burn and the metabolic rate that you operate at, you'd need that body mass. And that we see that in other species. They're bigger up north there where it's cold than they are down south. Here's the other difference. I believe up north they have more follicles per square inch when it comes to hair on their bodies. And the hair's 8 to 10 inches long in a lot of places. It's very fine and limp, like a wet noodle. Very fine, translucent. You can see through it. It's that fine. There's no medulla core at all. But it has more hair per square inch because it needs to insulate its body from the cold. Now, down south, I believe that your average one, not that they couldn't have long hair, but typically I've seen some of Tim T's samples. A lot of his samples are that long, and they're actually really dark and kind of coarse. But that makes sense. Your body needs to ventilate, not insulate. It's 100 degrees down there and a lot hotter than that, and it's humid. That hair doesn't need to mat down in big, thick layers, more follicles per square inch. You need less follicles per square inch that stand off of the body a little bit before they bend so that your body can ventilate. So when you see pictures like Larry Batson on Carrie's channel with Daniela, and he's drawing accounts that people describe, most of those southern accounts don't have hair longer than mine. And yet a lot of the northern accounts, the thing has hair like Keith Urban hanging down, right? I mean, it makes sense that would be typical because of the climates that exist. They should be bigger up north. They should have more hair per square inch and it'd be longer and finer because that's what we see in other animals. If I take a black bear from Canada, the way that its hair structure is on its skin and the amount of follicles per square inch is much more than a black bear in Florida. Okay, it looks different. Why wouldn't it? We just have to assume that it's plausible to assume that would be the case. So when people are down south and say, I found a hair, I can't say, is it 8 to 10 inches and really limp and fine? And is it translucent? It may not be down there because it's in a different climate than where it should be like that. So there are some differences. It doesn't mean they're not the same creature. Look at Connor's hair. He's a Caucasian with 2-foot long hair. And then you look at an Asian guy with hair about no longer than mine. And if you had somebody, a UFO comes, never seen a human being before, they don't even recognize these are the same species. They appear incredibly different from each other, you know? So, you know, we have to assume that, but they are of course, we know they're the same species. You take an African-American male's DNA and you take mine, you might be able to tell what parts of the world we differ from, but we're both human beings at the end of the day. We look the same under a microscope.
Well, here's an article. I'm gonna pull up this article. It's actually a DNA article, and it's from, let me see here. It's from Live Science, and this is what it says: Bigfoot is part human, DNA study claims. So there's an article. It's an older article, but I'm just showing. There's an article saying there already has been DNA on the Bigfoot, and it's part human.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't know if you guys ever heard any of these articles or heard of any stories that they've actually already done DNA on proven Bigfoot. But first of all, they got to admit that Bigfoot exists in the first place, right? It's a Live Science magazine. I mean, are they saying that Bigfoot's real and we got DNA and showing this part human?
Yeah. I would say that, first of all, let's entertain the idea of a cover-up. Let's suppose that the government or somebody already has mapped the DNA of Bigfoot, whether it's because they had a body or whatever, right? You can't assume that every element of that for over the years, however long it's been going on, that masking of this information, that something doesn't leak out, or a technology that they use to arrive there, that technology at least doesn't leak out, and somehow information just gets out there. Now, the whole Melba Ketchum thing, a lot of people have problems with what she was doing. She had issues with people that were on her team. Her own background came into question. There was a lot of stuff that when you bring up this evidence and start talking about Ketchum, a lot of people will just throw it in the trash bin right away. Okay,
so she's been debunked in a
way.
she
has been in most circles. Okay, there's still, it's not that people still don't look and say, okay, you can say this about her, you can say this about that, but the study itself, here's a piece of evidence. How do we discount that? That's why not everybody in the world's debunked it. Most people have, but some of them look at that and say, what she was claiming was that on the mitochondrial DNA level, that the test revealed that on the mother's side, there is human DNA in the mitochondrial side of that breakdown. So at some point in history, a human female mated with a male Bigfoot, and that was the conclusion that was supposed to have been drawn from that. Problem is, everybody debunked the whole process step by step, how she got there, who was on the team, and it's like it just gets thrown in the Rick Dyer fire. It's just let it burn up as bullshit. But so when I approach this and other people who are trying to solve this mystery, unfortunately, we can't give any credibility to what she did because of the questions that exist and how she got there. But one of the things I'm going to be talking about on my show in the end of December, and I'll just tell you right now, I'll give everybody a view of it. I believe that we have the ability to have better DNA than if Bigfoot were to spit in a cup and send it to Ancestry. I believe it's being done right now, and people don't know it. And why I say that is diving really deep into reading scientific papers that are wrote by different research teams from different colleges. There's a college in California that did something incredibly unique that I found out about. And then I started having discussions with Darby Orcutt and Doug. And that's that they wanted to study the vector transfer of mosquitoes being the pilot, blood feeding on a blood host like a deer or a rabbit, And could they transfer these viruses from animal to animal? So what they did is they went out and put a mosquito trap in a marsh in California, and they in one night collected 144 mosquitoes. Out of those 144 mosquitoes, 60 of them had blood in them. They had fed on a blood host, okay? And what their study was meant to do was to look at deer and rabbits and birds and wildlife and see if there was the same viruses being transferred from species to species. Could mosquitoes do that, right? Now, this study was in 2018. It was pre-COVID-19. Okay, it was back when we didn't have any worry about that, right? Out of those 60 samples, 45 of them were able to be classified in one of 5 groups. One of the groups was deer and large game like that. Another group was aviary, everything birds. Another group was feline, bobcats, anything that had to do from the cat family. Another group was rodents, rabbits, squirrels, ground gophers, whatever. They had 5 groups, okay? What they didn't have was primates, because they weren't out to, they just assumed if they had a sample there in California, somebody was jogging down a path and a mosquito bit them and ended up in their sample, right? They weren't interested in the primate part of that study. They didn't care about that. So the 15 samples they identified as primates, they threw them away. Okay. Now what they were doing is, I'm thinking in my head, how did they do this? Did they take the mosquito and take some micro needle and poke it in it and extract the blood? No. They, in layman's terms, they put it in a processor and turned it into mashed fucking mosquito potato. And they identified what exactly kind of mosquito it was, so that then when they sample the DNA, they throw all that out and say what's left. And they determine the blood host that mosquito fed on. That's how they did that. Now, I can tell you this. I don't know if there's any Bigfoots where they were. They didn't do it in Northern California, like up in Tahoe. They did it in an open marsh area. It's likely there weren't any Bigfoots there. But now you got to ask yourself, if you went up into Canada, 50 miles from the nearest town, a mosquito couldn't fly that far in its short lifespan, okay? And I walked in with protective gear so a mosquito can't bite me. And I put it in a mosquito trap, and I go back the next day and collect it. And we'd run that same study. If there's any primates in it, there's no fucking monkeys in Canada, dude. There isn't. And there were no humans in that area. So if you have a primate hit in Canada, you could probably collect 500 mosquitoes in one night. If you've got 300 of them that fed on a blood host, if one of them has primate DNA in it, I got to test it.
Let me ask
I
you guys
want to know what it came from.
Let me ask you guys your opinion.
So I'm just saying that method, look, dude, I traveled 1,000 miles in a kayak to get 27 hairs and 14 sebum samples. If I could have collected 500 mosquitoes in one night where no humans are and just mashed them all up and tested DNA, and plus it's blood DNA we're testing, not a hair. This is incredible. That's why I say scientists right now, they likely already had DNA if they did a study like that in the right area, and they threw them away because they weren't looking for that.
Yeah.
Now, people will say you got to fund that, right? I mean, how do you get funding to do it? Because that's an expensive study that university did down.
Ain't cheap.
But understand this. Just recently, Penn State did a study in the state of Iowa where they tested hundreds of white-tailed deer and determined that 80% of the Iowa white-tailed deer herd has COVID. Now, that's not COVID-19. That's a strain of COVID that has existed, just like the cold is a strain of COVID, So, but they determined that 80% of these deer carried that in their DNA, and they were able to determine that. Now with COVID-19 here, one thing that happened here in my hometown, we have a big zoo. We had a snow leopard get sick, and the next day died. And they tested it and it had COVID-19. And then the next day, one of the lions got sick and died. And they tested it and it had COVID-19 in the pen next to the snow leopard. Now universities are starting to realize that animals can catch this. It's not just humans. That animals can carry this virus. So what are they going to be doing over the next year? Funded research with universities is looking at animals, whether it's pet dogs, whether it's cows, whatever. How is it transferred through vector, through mosquitoes, right? Because that's a big danger. If you can show that herds of cows have it, and they're getting bit by mosquitoes, and those mosquitoes go on to bite something else the next night. So how are we transferring? So you're going to have universities studying this, right? Let them pay for the studies. Let them do them. I'm fine with that. What I want is every sample you get that's primate, don't throw it away. Give it to me.
But do you think they're going to get funded? Say they find some stuff. You think they'll be allowed or covered up to not tell us some of the things?
I think they will. I think, honestly, I think what we've discovered with the scientists that we're working with Doug and Justin with LMS2, is that science realizes that we're really close. They do. They're aware that whether it's real or whether it's not real, it's about to be proven likely in the next 18 months to 2 years. Okay. And what does science not want to do? They don't want to get caught with their ass hanging out on the wrong side of the fence. They do not. Your career is over if you've been saying there's no way in hell that can happen. And then the next day, there it is, right? Somebody hauls in a body or something and flips it all on its ear. Or they do a study like we're trying to do with LMS2 and prove that this is real, right? That there's something there. Well, now science is like, well, shit, I've been saying it isn't for so long, and now I have to admit it is. So a lot of scientists are starting to say, look, if you collect the hairs in the right way, or if you collect the evidence, the DNA testable material in the right way, we'll open our lab up, because if they can prove it's not real, or if they can prove it's real, either way is valuable to them. So they want to do that. They're not closed-minded to it. That every day we get as DNA technology, like you said, what we can do with DNA right now is 10 times more than what we could do last year. Oh, yeah. And next year, it's going to be 10 times more than what we can do today.
It's easier to track.
It is advancing so quickly that science is like, dude, we have to keep up with this, because if it's real, we don't want to be on the wrong side of the fence. That's how we found a lot of scientists approaching this. How else would we got a whole lab to open up their whole deal and say, we'll test every freaking hair you bring us? If it's vetted right, we'll test every one you bring us. It's because they're worried that if this thing's real, and if it's real, they want to be the ones to prove it. And if it's not real, they want to be the ones to definitively prove it's not real.
Either way, they win.
They're in.
They win either way.
So it's this mindset that we have that, oh, science doesn't want to do it. The fact is this: science for hundreds of years followed curiosity of man. Scientists saw something they were curious about. They went and studied it and proved it, yay or nay. They arrived at a scientific conclusion, and it was funded by curiosity. Science no longer exists like that. It's funded by money, and it's funded with an agenda. Before I hire your university to do something, here's the outcome I want it to arrive at. Otherwise, I have no interest in funding it.
Yep.
Okay. And so science doesn't follow the curiosity anymore. It follows the money trail. But we've reached a point in this mystery where there are tens of thousands of encounter stories and people that are flying pretty damn close to the sun right now, getting some pretty strong evidence to where scientists are like, I've got to hedge my bet and put a real effort into proving this yes or no. I can't just not and be involved in it and say no. That doesn't work anymore. There's too much out there that you can't just be the one saying no without taking an effort to prove that it's a no. So,
let me ask you guys an opinion. This is just an opinion. Connor, do you think, as an opinion, that there is some human DNA in a Bigfoot?
Oh, yeah, 100%. One of my favorite stories is Zana, the Russian ape lady. Of course, they captured her and broke her will, and then they mated with her. And the first two children she dumped in a river, and they ended up passing away. The third baby they ended up taking from her. He grew up They have pictures of him online, and they actually have his skull, and it was a little thicker. And then the story of course, the Ocheesee Pond Wild Man, which was captured in the 1800s here in the Panhandle, sent to the Chattahoochee Hospital as a lunatic, and he was covered in hair, a giant, and they buried him 3 years after probably experimenting on him. So a lot of these stories are human-based, and of course, I've seen a lot of the stuff under microscopes, and is very similar to the human compared to more of these animals. But
the problem that we have is all those things happen at a time when DNA isn't where it's at now, obviously. So, you know, had DNA been right now where it's at 30 years ago, 50 years ago, when some of these things happened, we wouldn't even be having this discussion probably. I mean, they would have showed that this is just a understanding that there are species that can evolve out of their niche, okay, and not be a different species. They just grew out of the niche. There's a lake in Canada that has lake trout in it that Doug is convinced, he's seen this, that there are lake trout that are 6 foot long instead of the normal 40 some inches that weigh 30 to 40% more. And it's not in any other lake, it's in this one lake. Okay. Those fish somehow evolved out of their niche somehow. Genetically, something got skewed and they just got bigger. Okay. Whether you can say that's a forage-based induced deal, they were feeding on something different, something spurred it, but enough of them got bigger to where pretty soon all the breeding and everything had just over time got bigger, right? It's not in any other lake. They evolved out of their niche. You might be talking about a human that somehow evolved out of its niche over a couple of generations, and all of a sudden they found one of them. Might not be its own species. It could be a human that evolved out of its niche. But because DNA wasn't where it's at now back then, we don't know the definitive answer to that. I don't doubt that there was a big hairy human that they found and had a thicker skull. So I look at it from a scientific point of view and say, because we couldn't test it to the level we can now, from a research point of view, I have to discount that and just move on with what I can work with now. But that's not to say I don't pay attention to those stories and say, hey, what was that? I can't give you a definitive answer, but there's several options. I can't just look at it and say, yeah, that was a Bigfoot. Could have been a human that evolved out of its niche through a few generations, through a family that was feral, and one of them came into community existence and was discovered. But you know, that's the great thing we can rest in now, is the peace of mind knowing that we have reached a point in science that if something like that in time duplicates itself, we have an answer to it now. It doesn't need to be a mystery. So,
well, it makes you think, right? Because I mean, look at the folklore story of the skinwalkers, basic skinwalkers that shape shifters. They apparently could shift into a wolf, into a Bigfoot, and all that. So I mean, there's different stories.
There's so much paranormal stuff that as a researcher, I have to look at it like this. I believe that orbs are a phenomena and they are real. I believe UFOs are a phenomena and they are real. I believe that spirits and ghosts are a phenomena and they are real. How they relate to Bigfoot, I don't have the research that can give us a definitive answer on it. I know there's people that say when they say Bigfoot, they see orbs around it, right? I heard a guy last night explain that he believes when a Bigfoot comes through a portal, that as it does that, it comes through it with so much energy, it has to bleed it off as it becomes into existence on Earth or in our presence. And that's what you see in orbs, is it's that energy bleeding off, okay? And that, you know, if that happens, if it's possible, I could say that's a plausible explanation. Yeah. But here's the deal. There's a lot of people that see Bigfoots that don't see orbs. And there's a lot of people that see orbs and there aren't Bigfoot around. Now I've got a problem. Now I've got to say, until I see Bigfoot fart out an orb myself on camera or something, I know that they both might be real, but I don't know how they're related. Okay, what is that symbiotic relationship there? I don't know. So I have to be careful that it's easy for me with an open mind to get wrapped up into some of the discussions that maybe Connor would have about the subject. But then I also look at it as a science point and say, God, if I could prove that, that'd be awesome. I mean, that's kind of the corner of the room that I have to operate in doing what I do. So I'd love, there's no doubt I've seen orbs. Our live cams, Doug's 9 live cams that he has on Randy's property in Minnesota, we got more footage of orbs than we do any other animal. It'd blow you away, the orb footage that we have. What it is, I don't know. We've discounted that it's not insects and it's not a reflection. It looks to be a plasmic shape, not just a shape, but a flexible shape that has life to it, that has a plasmic flexibility to it, that operates under its own energy. It can go behind a tree and then back out in front of it. Okay, it's not just following a wind current. You know what I mean? Like dust would. Mm-hmm. It has a directable energy. We've got one that flies right up by the camera and another one chasing it right after it. I mean, it flies a curved pattern up and it comes right past like it goes like this and it goes woo right past the camera, and right behind it there's another one following the exact same path. Dude, that is not a piece of ash from a forest fire. Okay, it's just not. They're real, but how they're related to Bigfoot, I don't know how they're related to Bigfoot. You know what I'm saying? I'd probably when we can map and discover what Bigfoot is, at least as an existing species, even if we don't have a body, we could look at that and say, how far back does it appear that it's evolved from these two different strains? How do they differ in what way? Or we may look at it and say, dude, there is a whole supernatural freaking presence in this. It's not a complete flesh and blood creature. Now, I pursue it as if it is, but DNA might show that it isn't, And so one of the other things we should also clear up is some of the misconceptions in, hey, Dart, thanks for coming on the show. I talked to him a little while ago. One of the things that is I've seen this a lot when we were listening to Ken from Big Fur. Okay, if you guys seen that documentary, it's pretty cool. He's the one that created a giant stuffed Bigfoot and won the world taxidermy competition. Okay, he has friends up in where he exists, which is very squatchy where he exists, that collected Bigfoot shit. And he believes 100% it is. They found the tracks and all this shit, right? So he put it in his freezer. And everybody's like, why don't you test that? Why don't you test that? I asked Doug that. I said, Ken would give it to us. Why don't we test it? He said, you want to know what? You don't test shit for DNA. And I thought, well, why wouldn't you? We test blood. We test spit, right? Well, if you think about it, if we lived in the wild, I'm going to eat a fish for breakfast. I'm going to eat a raccoon for lunch.
Yeah.
I'm going to eat on a dead deer carcass for dinner. And over 3 days, I'm going to take a shit and you're going to find it. And there's going to be 12 fucking creatures DNA in that. Mm-hmm. And probably very little of mine. So, I mean, what are we really looking for at that point? I mean, you've got all these it's really not a reliable source to test DNA from. And the other thing would be, I'll share this with you guys. I'm going to put this up on screen share so you can pop it up.
Sure.
And just real quick, while we're on the topic of shit and poop, at the Expedition Bigfoot Museum in Tennessee, they have a 24-inch long turd from Bigfoot. And then also the Mid-Florida team, Tim T, Winnette, and Marie DeMont also found a pile of skunk ape poop. But same thing that Jeff was just saying, there is just so much in that poop that is not testable. I said you should still bag it up, though. I have some hairy poop.
If I was to visit that museum, I'm taking my picture next to that shit because I don't care if it's Bigfoot or not. If something can shit 24 inches, that's impressive. Okay, that's a postcard.
My video, you got Mogs walking past it, and then I make a Chipotle and Taco Bell joke. So it's an incredible little 6 seconds.
So what I wanted to share here quick is eDNA. So a lot of people are confused about eDNA. Okay, it's there are limitations in how effective it is. Now, I wanted to explain why. And everybody's got it. It's a new science, pretty much. I mean, 5 years ago we weren't really talking about eDNA, right? So everybody has this perception that you can go to a river with a baby food jar and collect a vial of water and tell everything that's taken a shit or piss or shed skin cells in that river for up 2 miles upstream. That's not really the case because that's not a big enough sample, one vial of water. This is a graph that shows you how they typically will test eDNA. They go in, you'll see where, I'll use this to follow along. This looks like a backpack weed sprayer, right? This is a vacuum. So it's like a dredge. It sucks up this water, right? And you're going to suck it up from this area of the lake. You're going to suck it up from 10 different areas of this lake. And it has a filter right here in it, okay? So at the end of the day, after a few hours of sucking up water out of this river or wherever you're getting it, that filter has a layer of scum over it, okay? And you're now putting that in a filter transfer vial, and you are going to extract DNA. Now let me ask something. How many types of DNA do you suppose you found doing that? Every species of fish in there is in it. So you probably got 10 or 12 species of fish.
Yeah.
Snails, clams, bears that walked across the river, raccoons that drank from it, deer that drank from it. You've got so much DNA compound into here that even if you extract it and we're able to identify some of them, when you get to that one that's unknown or unknown primate, you start asking yourself, is this even a valid sample because of how much we were testing from that one filter, right? This isn't a drop of blood or a hair follicle, okay? So it's a new science. It's evolving very quickly, but the idea that you can extract an eDNA sample from water and tell everything that's associated. I could extract eDNA from, let's say, a 20-foot round puddle in the middle of a cornfield. And I can tell that there's been wildlife that's drank from there. There's deer. I can tell if the deer has chronic wasting disease. I can tell if raccoons and a possum or something like that. Maybe there was waterfowl on it. But we're sampling a small piece of water at that point. When you're sampling a river that's flown from 1,000 miles in some cases, and all the different species that have shed DNA in that water, boy, trying to find one little piece of DNA to break down a genome from, that gets hard. So I don't want people to look at this and say, oh, eDNA will tell us. Dude, that's a long shot. It'll tell you a lot of stuff, but to think that we're going to extract good Bigfoot eDNA because it walked across the river, that's hard. That's really hard. So when you look at all the other DNA samples that are there from fish that are staying stationary in that section of the river and animals that always come to that spot to drink, and now you got a Bigfoot that crossed the river for 30 seconds, 3 miles upriver, that DNA may have flown and went by in 3 minutes and it's gone. So it's just really hard to think that you're going to get that Bigfoot DNA from an eDNA water sample on a river, let's say. But that's not to say that science won't evolve over the next year or so and be look completely different in its capability than it does now.
And it'll get cheaper. And when it starts to get cheaper, we'll probably start getting people to send in more stuff that might be from a Bigfoot, dog man. And
I think the factor is being able to piggyback off of existing studies that are happening. That's my whole premise on the mosquito deal. I can't fund a $250,000 study to go collect 500 samples and 243 have bloods. Now let's do 243 times 10 grand. Yeah, let's test them all. But if a study's already doing something, a university's already doing a study like that, trying to find something else, now I just want to slip in the back door and say, here's 50 grand. Give us all your ones that show primate.
Jeff, I just told everybody in the chat to send you all the hairs.
Well, we've got an arrangement with LMS too that if we can get samples from around the country that pass these criteria marks and we can show that they're 5-scale patterns and stuff, yeah, we'd probably I think we'd include them in the samples that we're planning on turning in. But like I say, it's a strict vetting process, and I get where everybody's passionate about whatever they found and whatever they collect. I just want to prepare people to hear it didn't make the cut or it wasn't good enough. It doesn't mean you're less of a researcher. Dude, I have found so many samples that I've shown to Doug and say, we got to test this. And he says, And I'm just like, son of a bitch. I was really excited about that. But and I'll tell you how some of that happened. I was using glass jars to collect sebum samples, meaning I'd have a polished rock or a piece of bit of honey candy in a baby food jar that's glass, it's perfectly clean, lid on tight. I'd go collect it the next day, the lid's off, it's removed, and sometimes the lid's screwed back on after it's empty. But touching that glass, I got smears of skin oil on them that we sampled, okay, and the lid. We did that with other items that we left in there. But here's the deal, a DNA skin oil sample. What we're testing in that oil or that that waxy type substance that they leave when they touch something, we're looking for skin cells. It's not the oil itself that contains the DNA. It's those dead skin cells in it that will hold the right DNA to test. And what happens with that is if it's left on a piece of glass, very testable. If it's left on a piece of plexiglass or plastic, now you've got an issue. Not saying you can't test it, but it becomes a coin toss because the way those skin cells that are in that sample react on plexiglass versus glass, plexiglass has a chemical composition that will deteriorate those skin cells from being testable. So I've been using pieces of plexiglass, getting fingerprints on them, and then I talked to Darwin. He says, God, if you would have used real glass, we'd have a better chance. And I'm like, son of a bitch, you learn this on the backside, right? But that may happen when somebody says, I've got a sample, will you test it? And we look at it and look at how it was collected, and we say, there's something about it that doesn't bring it to that level of we've got to test this. And I don't want people to feel like that's a personal shot or they fell short. It happens to everybody in this community. So, it's the same thing with castings. You get a casting and you send it to Jeff Meldrum and he looks at it. What's he looking for? He's looking for dermal ridges. He's looking for an evidence of a mid-tarsal break in that footprint. He's looking at the shape of the toes to compare to past castings he's had. And if he can't find that stuff, he doesn't sugarcoat it. It's not everybody gets a trophy in this freaking game. It isn't. He's going to tell you, dude, it's great job getting the casting, but I can't draw any conclusions from it.
That's the thing, right? That's the thing. It's not a bad thing for anybody because if you thought you caught something, that means you're excited.
Yeah.
You weren't even, I don't know if somebody's researching or just going out there and they're seeing something. That's excitement that they develop. Even if you say, hey, I can't, it doesn't meet the criteria, but it still makes you feel good that.
Well, exactly. I compare the difference between researchers and people who are searchers is a lot of times searchers are looking for an experience. Okay. And there's nothing wrong with that. If the three of us go out in your neck of the woods, Gypsy, and we start tree knocking at 3 a.m. and something howls back or tree knocks back, dude, that's a freaking awesome experience. We're going to tell people about this forever. We're going to post a video of it on YouTube, all that shit, right? But what did we do to advance the science? We may not have done anything other than just really had a great experience. Okay. Now, if people are leaving marbles on a log and they go back 2 weeks later and those marbles are moved or they're rearranged and they're like, oh, something's doing this, right? Every time I leave marbles, they get moved. Are you collecting DNA off of it? Are you really doing anything in an effort to collect DNA? Maybe not. But if I took a 10-inch piece of glass, like really thick glass that's not easy to break, or even plexiglass that's clear, and I lay it over the top of them marbles, what's it going to do? It's still just as curious. It's coming to, because it's curious. That's its weakest link in its armor, is its curiosity. It likes playing with those marbles you leave, right? So it shows up and it sees this piece of glass over them or piece of plexiglass. It's got to pick it up, move it to the side before it gets to play with the marbles. It just left a DNA sample. So a lot of times we're not talking about something different about, you might already be doing shit the right way. I heard Tim tell me one time down in Florida, in your neck of the woods, he said he leaves wrapped little fun-size Snicker bars and they freaking get taken, right?
Oh, that's
There's
me.
no scent coming off them. They're wrapped. Okay. And I said, well, can you tell what it is? I don't know. I said, well, why don't you leave one next to the base of a tree and take a 10-inch piece of clear plexiglass and lean it, if this is the tree, lean it 45 degrees up against the tree and put the Snicker under it. So now to get the Snicker, it has to move the piece of plexiglass. It just left a print or a skin oil sample. So we're not talking about altering maybe even what you're already doing. The Velcro on the fence post. You might be walking by that fence line every day when you go out to your research area to look around. Put a piece of Velcro on that end post where it might set its hand as it goes around the corner.
Yeah,
you're not doing anything different. You're just taking an extra little step.
The Squatch Cowboy said earlier in the chat that he's going to start using Velcro.
Yeah. Yeah, there's different things that you can use. It's just, when I started this whole thing this summer, I didn't realize that plastic doesn't carry as much integrity to the sustaining of the DNA that's left on it as glass does. If I would have known that, I never probably would have put plexiglass out there. Now, that's not to say that plexiglass can't get a sample that's testable, but if only 50% of them on plexiglass, let's say, are testable, but 100% on a glass jar, I wouldn't have left any plexiglass out there. I just want to increase the odds as much as I can.
Yeah, that is the one cool thing about researching Bigfoot versus researching ghosts and all that, because you can't get DNA from a ghost. As far as I know, UFO, you can't get DNA from UFO unless you have an alien on the ground. You can't get,
and even then we don't know.
That we don't.
You don't know what their their makeup is. I mean, it might not contain DNA. It might contain a whole different identifying marker that we aren't even familiar with. And it likely would contain a different marker that we're not familiar with more than DNA. I mean, DNA, the only thing we've established is that living creatures on the earth seem to have DNA. That doesn't mean a living creature from a whole different area different planet has the same genetic markers in it.
It just sucks. We live in a society that words not good enough, a picture is not good enough, video is good enough. People want yes or no. They just want a yes or no. DNA proves it. Yes. DNA don't prove it. No. Does it exist? I mean, we live in that world that people do not want to open their minds. They just don't.
It's culture that pushes you that way. It has with everything, especially like if you look at young people in high school. When I was in high school, there was all these different cliques. There was the jocks, there was the burnouts, there was the nerds, there was the art kids, there were the kids in band. There were kids like me who said, fuck everybody, and had a band and played at bars when they were 16. You had everything back then, right?
Yep.
Now kids are told by billboards and magazines, you have to be this pretty. You have to dress like this. That pressure wasn't there then. Culture is pushing people and herding them like cats into corners. And people are doing it because over time they get used to being herded, so to speak. You say, you got to wear a mask or you're going to die. Okay, well, there's some of us that say, fuck that, I'm not going to wear a mask. And then there's others that say, I can't leave my house to go walk out to my mailbox without putting a mask on because I think I'm going to die, right? Culture has pushed us to be herdable. And when people say, well, I don't know if I believe in that, it's because everybody's got a different threshold of evidence they need to be a believer in anything, whether it's God, whether it's whatever, okay? And when it comes to Bigfoot, there are people like me who have had a physical encounter and say, I don't have a choice but to believe because I saw it, right? There's other people who know people, their brother or their husband or a close friend that had an encounter like somebody like me, and they say, I know him too well to think he's lying. I believe this has to be real, right? There's other people who have heard things or seen things while they're out in the woods that they can't explain. So they've opened their mind up to be real.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people in chat who've had no experience with it, but they're open-minded enough. And these are the real warriors that are able to open their mind up and say, I've seen enough and heard enough that I can't say that it's real or not, but it's possible. And that's why I'm here listening. Okay. The people who say, no, it's not real, there comes a point, and I say this whether we're talking about God or anything else that you'd have to believe in, the energy it takes to look at all the evidence and encounters and stories and things out there, the cave drawings for thousands of years globally, all across the world, before there was an internet. The idea that one guy got hammered around a campfire 10,000 years ago and made up a story about Bigfoot, and somehow on the other side of the world that got drawn onto a cave wall. The energy it takes to try to say that I can't believe that is more energy to expend than it takes to open your mind up and say, it could be possible. To be a denier takes a lot of energy.
You know, but there's also problems, not just with people outside the community, people within the community. And let me show you an example. I'm going to show you my channel. Okay. I'm just showing an example. If I do a show just on one topic, like Bigfoot and stuff, you'll see likes. I'm just using it as an example. 92%, 90%, 98%, right? 90% when you talk about Bigfoot and stuff. 100% when you talk about one subject. I do a show called Breaking News that I do all communities. UFOs, all of it, right? You come over here, once you mix all communities together, look at this. 70%, 77, 75, 89.
And the
71.
reason is this. When you do a show
75.
about Bigfoot, you're attracting a captured audience who's there because that's what the topic is about. When you do a show about ghosts, people are coming to listen are people who have an interest in that topic and a familiarity with that topic. When you start talking about, we're going to talk about all areas of the paranormal, there's a bigger chance that you're going to get somebody who says, oh, I believe ghosts are real, but UFOs are bullshit. All of a sudden there comes the dislike. It's like, dude, why did you have to do that? Right.
But I get all that. And the thing is, when I try to break down the barrier is, I want people in the UFO respect the other communities for their research. You don't have to believe in the Bigfoot, but respect that they're actually trying to figure it out, because you in the UFO, you're trying to do the same thing.
Yeah.
I know people think the Mandela effect people are crazy, but the people are trying to find evidence of a change. I mean, everybody is trying, and I think people should respect that. Not like UFOs, Bigfoots. What the fuck are you talking about? Get that fuck out of here. It's like, respect the research. These people are like Jeff. You have a channel, you're bringing people on.
Yeah, I just started a couple of weeks ago, and I thank you guys for promoting it because enough places like you have promoted it. I ended up with I've got over 240 subscribers in 12 days or something like that. I've done 2 episodes that each have over 550 views on each one. It's just crazy that I just started this and it's taken off. I appreciate the support.
No problem. See, this is why I like Connor, because people go, Eric, if you want more views and all that, you're going to have to stick with one subject and make your whole channel under one subject. I won't do that. I talk about all subjects. Connor does the same thing. Yeah. And I respect people.
There's a lot of niches out there. Okay.
They are.
You can reach a very diverse crowd with your format because you're open to a lot of different subjects. And then you look at, even in the Bigfoot community, I said for so long, the last thing YouTube needs is another fucking Bigfoot channel. I mean, it does not need that, right? But then I saw what people were doing out there and what niches are they filling. And I get where a lot of channels have decent guests on that talk about research or encounters. But They also are there for the entertainment value. A lot of them will even leverage the shock value and, kind of how we name our videos to intrigue people, right? I get that. But nobody was really out there just saying the only thing I'm going to talk about is the nuts and bolts of the technology and research. I'm going to talk about how we use drones. I'm going to talk about how we evaluate DNA and what's that science capable of. I'm going to talk about Doug Hychek. He's going to be on next week with me talking about the Legend Meets Science 2 documentary that's coming out. I don't really have somebody telling me how Bigfoot jumped on the hood of their pickup truck and took a piss on the windshield. I mean, I'll watch that guy tell that story if it's on another channel, but it's just not my forte. It's not what I'm going after,
Is that real? Is that a real story? That
I don't know.
On a truck and
I don't know. It'd be cool if it was. Actually, I will tell you what is a real story. Is this just happened a couple weeks ago. I know this for a fact because I was talking to somebody who is working on a documentary of stuff that is happening over and over in certain properties around the country. Okay. And it's going to be made for a network, one of the cable networks. And so they're going to feature several different people on this documentary that have had experiences on their property more than once. Okay. So, this is just a couple of weeks old. This guy is in Texas. He lives near the Arkansas border. He was in his driveway and said that a Bigfoot, as he was on his cell phone, jumped in the bed of his truck, just came up out of the woods, jumped on the bed of his truck. And when he jumped into the bed of it and jumped up and down, the trailer hitch just crashed into the cement because of the weight of this thing. He had his trailer hitch on when he pulled his boat, just crashed into the cement. And the thing jumped out of his truck, screamed at him, and ran away. And this guy's had more than one encounter on his property. So, I mean, it freaked him out, but yet he's like, shit, it happened again. Okay. And I asked the person who's working on this, I said, did you interview anybody? Yeah, the sheriff's department was there and they filled out a whole report because this guy pulled out a 9mm and took a shot at it. And the sheriff's department said there is blood in the driveway. Now I'm like, tell me they got a freaking sample of it, right? I don't know if they did or not. The sheriff's department, none of them deputies probably even thought this was a real thing, right? So I don't know how they've approached that. But one of the questions I asked this producer is, did they dent or leave any damage to the truck? And he said, no. I said, you know how pissed I would be if Bigfoot jumped in the back of my truck and didn't leave a dent in it? I mean, I want my buddy to say, hey, what happened to your truck? And I say, fucking Bigfoot jumped in the back of it, right? There's no damage to it. I'm like, that would suck. I'd want the whole freaking back end caved in so I could tell the insurance company it was fucking Bigfoot. Read the sheriff's report,
We got a question. Is there bitchness in the Bigfoot community?
Well, of course there is. Let's understand this. Let's just talk real truths here.
Yeah.
Most of the people who have a channel out there are type A personalities. Okay. You can't really deny that. And that means they're passionate about things. They're strongly opinionated about things. They're leaders a lot of times. That's why they started a channel, is because they feel they're capable of bringing something to the table. But also, you put 3 type A personalities in an elevator and they hit the down button with it. By the time that door opens, there's something they're talking about that one of them doesn't agree on with the others. Because they're not the type of people that would say, you know what, he's talking about something that I have a different opinion on, but I'm going to keep it to myself. No, type A personalities tend to say, I don't agree with you on that. And that is what happens in our community, is when we start getting this bickering and bitchiness. It's not just people who have channels, people in the chat. Some of them are here just to hear the stories and be entertained and learn, be educated on the subject. Others are just like me. They're researchers out there grinding away, right? And they develop their own theories about stuff on their experiences. And their theories might not line up with something I'm talking about tonight. And they say, well, I like the guy. I like how what he said about this and this and this and this. but we don't focus on the 90% of the things we have in common. The 10% of the things we differ on, we poison each other with. We try to kill each other by poisoning each other with it. And that's what's killing this community. If we could say, hey, look, I acknowledge that there's people that I don't really like, right? I don't like their personality, but I acknowledge that I can learn something from them. If I just listen to what they're sharing, I can learn something from it. It doesn't matter if I don't like them, right? If we can keep moving forward on the 90% we have in common and share our opinions on, we can advance the science probably a lot, twice as fast than if we start focusing on that 10% we differ on and try to poison each other with. But for some reason, this community, that 10% just keeps flowing like a fucking river right through the middle of it. And that's the problem. That's one of the reasons why I just want to talk nuts and bolts research on my channel, is hopefully we can at least all agree on the tools and the techniques. Whereas if I start saying as a matter of fact, well, if they blink their eyes 4 times at you, that means they hate you. What fact is that based on, right? I mean, that might have happened one time to me, but that doesn't make it a fact. So if I go out and say, hey, if they ever do this, you're fucked, there's going to be people that hear that and say, I don't agree with that. And now they don't come back to the channel because they're using, doesn't matter all the stuff I said before that they agreed on. I said one thing that they don't, and all of a sudden we're poisoning each other with it. And that's what happens in this community. Kerry's not able to be here tonight. I wish he was, because I wanted to give him accolades on the 168. And the reason is this: whether or not people's their impressions of the evidence that 168 produced, whether they feel strongly about it or whether they feel pretty weak about it or disagreeing about it, the fact is this: he brought a lot of people together in one spot that developed relationships, that shared experiences, that educated each other, okay? And just the fact that he had all those people in one place and documented and gave them a venue to be there for that long of a period, he probably did more to advance the science just in that than any picture could have done.
Yeah.
Right? You can't deny that relationships were built and fellowship was had and education was shared and experiences, and everybody got smarter from being there, right? I don't give a shit what you think about the picture. The picture, had it been perfect, I don't know that it would have advanced the science. It wouldn't have. But these relationships that are built, those are in place to advance the science now.
That's
so he deserves a Nobel freaking Prize for having that many people be able to develop relationships with each other and share and educate each other. I don't care if any evidence was produced. Now, people will still look at it and judge it based on, I think the picture is blurry, or it was this, or it was that. So be it. But I refuse to look at the 10% of that I don't like. I want to really focus on the 90% that he accomplished. That was pretty freaking cool.
That's what I love when Connor and them went on that Stacy Brown expedition. Stacy Brown, I mean, you got to give that guy credit for bringing people together, actually walking, looking, and you guys found that hair, for example, the excitement. I mean, that's,
and then, here's the other thing I'd want to say, because I hope Kerry hears this. If I was to be critical of the documentary that he produced and said, well, here's the one thing that I think what you should have done different, or rather than just putting the pictures in, maybe set them up, or the backstory should have prefaced it better, that we wish maybe we could have got this better had we done this or that. I don't think it would have been perceived the same. That was really the part that I was critical about. But I've heard Kerry say himself on recent interviews that say, look, the next part that he's going to release is going to be different. He says, if I could go back and have done this over and that, I would have done this differently, that differently. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Because
that, right?
He's listening to the feedback and he's looking at saying, yeah, I could have probably done that a little bit differently, and I'm going to next time. He's not sitting there saying, you guys, he's not doing the whole porcupine thing.
Yeah.
He's not saying, fuck, if you don't see a porcupine, you're crazy. You know,
Connor and I, when we had Stacy Brown on the show, I mean, he wasn't happy with his movie, saying he wish he would have done this and this and this. Because you're never happy with your final product.
No.
There's always something. Like, I can watch the show tomorrow and say, man, I should have said this. I should have asked Connor this. I should have done this.
If you're really passionate about what you're trying to do, you will be your worst critic. If you're truly passionate about it, if you care about people perceiving it the way you wanted to project it, when you watch it, the playback, and you realize, man, I could have done that better and it would have been received better had I just done this one thing a little bit differently, that eats at you. You know why? Because you're passionate about it. You care about how good it was. So when I hear Kerry go on shows and be a little critical of his own work and say, I wish I would have done this different, next time I'm going to make sure we do this or that, I appreciate that, because it means he wasn't tone deaf to what he was hearing. He's just looking at it and saying, hey, you know, I'm not Steven Spielberg, okay, but I'm trying. And here's what I've learned from this, and here's what I'm going to do different.
You got to appreciate that. You got to appreciate he made a documentary. He makes documentaries.
Well, and in the end, it's his documentary. It's not mine.
Connor was in Voycat, and he'll tell you that, you know, that's work. I mean, that's people getting together. Even if you don't think, I saw the Voycat. I think it's awesome. But even a bad movie, even if you watch a bad movie, you got to appreciate people go there and they put their heart and soul in it. Sometimes it comes out the way they want it. Sometimes it don't. But the hard work, you got to appreciate it.
Yeah. Because I look at it and say, at the end of the day, if I put out a documentary and you're critical about it and you say you should have done this different, that different, I guess my response would be, well, go make your own documentary.
Jeff,
let me see it.
Jeff, if you put out a documentary, you automatically know the massive public is going to put it down automatically without even watching it.
We're doing one. We're doing one next summer.
Out there. You're putting yourself out there to be criticized by people who don't even want to give it a chance.
Yeah.
So that takes balls and guts to do.
Look at your favorite movies throughout the years. I mean, ones that you call classics, right? Go back and look at Christine and, you know, some of the shit that was like, man, right? And you look at the ratings that were on those movies at the time, nobody got 5 stars. Nobody did. Even the biggest iconic ones that really shaped us, you go back and read those reviews back in 1991 or 1984, when some of this stuff was being made, they didn't get 5 stars. And yet they went down in history as being, that was a great movie, you know? So don't get frustrated. Here's the problem. We don't hear the 80% of people that are giving us the accolades. We hear the 20% that are being critical, and that sounds like it's coming through a bullhorn right in our face. Don't focus on that. At the end of the day, if Connor makes a documentary and puts it out and there's things that I would have done differently, well, I may express that, but the fact is it was Connor's documentary, not mine.
Yeah.
That 168, it has 100,000 views. You know, you got to think 20,000, 25,000 might be from the Sasquatch community. And then the rest is from people not even exposed to this topic. And I think that documentary did enough. It had awesome historical encounters from Buckeye Bigfoot and Dixie Cryptid, 2 of the best narrators. You got 25 plus researchers bound together. That's camaraderie, of course. Like Jeff said, I think there should be multiple parts of this. The first one, it had some awesome photographs. A lot of people cry pareidolia, but I saw multiple photographs and there's movement between it. And that's the skunk ape. Come down here in the Florida swamp and try to take a picture and then decipher through it. If you know what you're looking for, they captured some kind of creature on that. And guys, all it takes is one photograph, and we draw the bar so freaking high and we want to be Justin Chirpinski with everything. I admire it. You know, if
I do.
anything, it was the one gator shot that showed fingers on top of the scene. That's the only thing I have a complaint for. And I have 2,200 plus movies that I've rated and reviewed. So I'm not saying I know a bunch about movies, but it's like, guys, you got to widen your perspective and watch 25 Bigfoot documentaries before you crap on the 168. Because
if you got to understand,
remarkable.
You got to understand too that it's not going to be the big funded research projects that are going to bust this thing open. It's likely going to be the guy who was out camping and shot the right footage or found something. Yeah, I'll give you an example of that. Doug Hychak was on a trip to do a documentary about something. He was on a boat, right? And on this boat, he had brought like a 2-foot long lure that looked like a baby squid that had a camera embedded in the back and had 1,000 feet of cable that ran to a recording unit. And he packed this in his personal baggage, okay? And when he was on the boat, they were out there for multiple nights, and they would take turns. Somebody had to stay awake overnight out on deck to monitor the equipment they were using for this other deal. And so as they're trolling along slow, and he's the one pulling the watch that night. And when everybody else was sleeping, he unstrung that thing and wound it back behind the boat, started pulling it. And that was the first footage ever caught of a giant squid, ever. He broke that whole thing open because one guy said, fuck it, I'm going to put this out. Nobody else is looking. And that's not a funded research project. There weren't 100 people involved in that. There was no lab involved in that. It was a guy on a boat who said, fuck it, I'm going to stick this out and see if it works. He thought outside the box when he made the thing with the camera in it. That's what it's going to take.
Yep.
It isn't going to be some giant university team likely. So, that's why I say we can classify ourselves as researchers or searchers or enthusiasts. I don't give a shit what category you fall in. You got as much chance of proving this thing and flipping it on its ear as I do. You really do. It's just being prepared to try to do it. And once you've captured something you consider evidence, having the right plan to vet it rather than just walking into the room naked and showing it to everybody and letting everybody attack you. And there's nobody there to say, no, I'm a professional and I looked at it. I'm a video professional. I'm an audio sound analyst. You get everybody involved in that, vetting it, and then you put it out. You're not walking into the room naked anymore. Let people attack you. If they did that to me, I'd say you can disagree with me, but here's 4 professionals that didn't.
I agree. Now look at this. See, Bob and I made a movie. We made a short movie. Here, look at this fine. Let me play this little clip. Look at this fine acting that Bob and I did making my little horror movie. That's actually on this channel. Look at this fine acting with my beautiful green screen in the back. Oh, I can't hear it.
My God, what did you find?
The head of Tutuli.
That's not common. What the fuck is this? This is probably like 5 years old. This is not a pharaoh.
Top notch, baby. Top
I
notch.
think we found something nice here. This is really good, but fuck this. I found something better.
But then,
My God, I got a phone call.
look at this beautiful camera work. Look how good of a director I am.
I don't know.
Like a lot of sci-fi movies, it started with a lot of premise and hope, and it crashed down toward the end. But
I'll just say this, and it's not just counting your acting ability, Eric, but anything you film with your brother in it, I will watch. That guy I get a kick out of him.
Yeah, that's a top-notch movie I made there. And I stole clips from other movies and I put it in there. Oh, well, But you got to have fun, right? You got to have fun in the community. You got to laugh at yourself. Every greatness starts from weakness, right?
I try to approach a lot of this tongue-in-cheek. That's the problem with this community is, like in a chat, it's very hard to be sarcastic and people to sense that, right? But if you hang out with me long enough for a couple of days, you're going to find out I'm pretty sarcastic and I say a lot of shit tongue in cheek, you know. Just doesn't project well in a chat or in text and things like that. And when you can make a movie, or even now that I've got a channel and able to talk to people, I think people develop and sense your personality a lot better than reading what you write, so to speak. Even the guys who do the call-in shows and stuff where they won't show their face, or they do an audio podcast. To me, it just feels like I can't really connect with people when that's the case. I mean, I think this is a great opportunity we have with different YouTube channels to talk about different areas of the paranormal and phenomena and how we approach it and different viewpoints. I hope that we can keep moving forward in a respectful way and, like I say, focus on the 90% and not try to poison each other with the 10%. But, you know, I don't think that's all ever going to go away. It's always going to be there. We just got to rise above it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, we just want everybody to listen and learn. Listen, our good friend of the channel, Through the Veil Paranormal, Nicole, she's a medium. They were out on a paranormal research at a graveyard by a forest. They were there for ghost reasons, but they actually ran into where they caught some red eyes out in the woods, and she swears she heard sounds like a Bigfoot. They weren't even there for Bigfoot. Yeah. They were there for a paranormal research, but when you start listening to other channels, you kind of help preparing yourself, because what if you run into a situation, even if you don't think you believe in it, but what if you run into it where you're like, holy shit, I've heard this one. I've heard this story. Maybe I could try this to get away from it or whatever.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's all about reference. I mean, life experience brings you all these things that either happen in person or things you've learned about along the way that give you a point of reference, so that future experiences, you have something to compare them to. I've heard this. I've seen this. I've experienced this. People who don't really operate in that level of having a lot of reference to fall back on. People will say, oh, you're young, you don't know. That's bullshit. A lot of people have a lot of life experience that they've developed. Even when it comes to like research, like I take part in. I mean, we're talking about being out in the woods. You know, I grew up the son of a hunting and fishing guide. I was weaned off of my mother's milk by carrying my dad's beer around out in the woods while we're fishing or hunting, you know. But just because you live in downtown LA or Chicago doesn't mean you can't be knowledgeable on this stuff, because of what we have right here. The ability to get educated and learn from others on different shows. And so, you know, you might only find yourself in the woods once or twice a year. I might find myself in the woods 320 times a year. But the fact is that doesn't guarantee that you're one of your 1 or 2 times isn't the time you have an experience, and I don't have one at all in 320 trips. We don't get. You can sit there all day long at the casino pulling the blackjack bar and not win, and some old lady sits down and puts 1 quarter in and boom, 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 boom. That happens, you know.
I'm all about just opening up the door and spreading the word to everybody. As you guys know, I try to cover as many avenues as possible with Mothman, Mantis Man, the Lake Erie Monster, Bigfoot. And a lot of people cannot see the drawn connections. But once you see through the veil and you understand the establishment is hiding that magic that is just right between us. Of course, you know, we live on sacred soil here in America. We had freaking pyramids and also these race of people before the Native Americans that taught them about science and spirits and also medicine. And I'm all about just trying to closen that bridge up. And of course, Jeff is, you know, doing the DNA, and that is such incredible research because it's tangible, and having saliva out here, hair, and then all the other type of situations like eDNA, and just having, vials that you can go buy. And I am guilty. Jeff, I'm planning on filling 20 vials up and giving them all to different researchers at the Florida Bigfoot Conference. Of course, I'm not expecting them to do an eDNA research, but that's what I represent. I'm just trying to bring people closer to this because we already are ancestors with them. So of course I love all the different angles, and a lot of people they wouldn't understand me and Jeff being on the same screen, sharing a friendship and sharing research. They would not understand because we're coming at two different positions, but we understand where the end zone is, and it's forward, guys.
Yeah. No, absolutely. One thing about DNA is, you can try to debunk all you want. If the DNA is done properly, you can't debunk DNA if it's done properly. It's the one thing
the one thing you just really need to remember is basically everything that has been done before today, right now, as it pertains to DNA research, has been complete shit. It really has. Most of these studies, once they reached the stage of unknown primate, went in the garbage. They didn't have the technology to take it a lot further than that. They didn't have a reason or funding or a genuine curiosity to take it further than that. It really comes down to getting the right scientists who are all really motivated to figure out an answer as much as we are. Now, all of a sudden, you can probably advance with DNA and have something reputable on the backside of it. But whether it's from technology or lack of funding or whatever, everything that's happened from in the past till now in DNA research, Doug Hychak, Darby Orcutt, these guys will all tell you it's pretty much all shit because nobody base mapped anything. All these samples that we said we aren't interested in threw away, they never got base mapped. I don't care if the sample from 5 years ago was unknown and you threw it away. Had we cataloged it, and then a year later when another sample comes in, are they the same? No, we threw them all away. We got rid of them. We moved on. We said it's junk. There wasn't enough interest to take it to the next level. They may have tested it on the mitochondrial level and didn't advance to the nuclear level because it's just like, forget it. Let's go on. And I think we've reached that point now in technology and also ambition that we want a real answer. It's just we've seen too much now to not want a real answer.
Yep.
That's the thing. I like this. Steve Austin, the $6 million man, feature a Bigfoot episode. I remember that. The $6 man went up against a Bigfoot.
Yeah.
Hey, Jeff, is there any communication between you and Doug with any of the people that were featured in the Melba Ketchum study? Because there was, dozens of samples submitted. And I'm sure that some of the, researchers and people that just hold those samples, they probably still have some of those samples and to, maybe see if they correlate with yours. I'd be very interested in that.
Yeah, really what the samples that we've gotten, and they're not just my samples. I mean, I know I talk about it a lot. All those samples came from one area. And although I've got reason to believe when I was in that area that I could prove that there was at least 3, if not more, individuals in that area that I was interacting with collecting the samples. The thing is, I don't know if it was 3 or if it was 10, but it could be that the only one that was curious maybe was a juvenile, and all the samples I got may have came from one, right? I don't know. We don't know yet. But we've got samples that we've collected from people who have been working in research from different areas of the country. It wouldn't make any sense to get them all from one spot, right? And so we aren't really lacking in enough material to test. Although we'll test as much as we can collect that, like I say, passes that vetting screen, so to speak. But it's just one of those deals where when we look at what's been done in the past, we're really careful right now of like duplicating and triplicating the testing processes and the different people involved in it, making sure that we don't have somebody who ends up being involved that's planted from the government or carries a background has some suspicion to it, things like that, right? we're trying to look at this and say we're starting with a clean slate with new samples with today's technology, and this is what we're going to map. Now, that's not to say on the backside, let's say we get out of 27 hair samples, and plus we've got over 100 samples to test. So as far as what we've collected, let's suppose you get 41 catalogable matches that tested right. That's not to say at that point you don't circle around and say, let's get 50 more. I mean, you've just started at that point. You wrote the first 3 pages of a novel at that point, okay? So, at that point, maybe you do circle back and look at the things that you're talking about, existing samples that maybe the study was shit, but the samples are still there. Why don't we use them, right? Or maybe we advance in how we get samples and use like the mosquito vector study that I told you about. There's a lot of ways that we could keep going. What we're really trying to do is write the first page of the novel. It's got to get started to where this stuff starts getting cataloged properly. Mm-hmm. And nobody's done that yet. So,
I love it because technology is getting better, things getting cheaper. It's eventually there's going to be more DNA, more stuff, and it's getting better and better every single day. We're going to get to that point where you're going to have all that information. I mean, it's so exciting.
Well, and that's when we look back in retrospect. Okay, let's say we do have all those samples and they're starting to get cataloged and the base is growing, right? And you look back at who did we get those samples from? Who did we get those samples from? Let me tell you, some of these people out there that you're throwing in the crazy bin and you're saying he's a fake or he's crazy or he's whatever, that doesn't mean that he's less capable of getting us the right sample as you are. It's sometimes it's a matter of luck. Sometimes it's a matter of just being blessed and being in the right spot at the right time. You're going to look back in retrospect and say, where we got some of them samples were people that that you may not have respected very well at all. What happened? I mean, I know this is out there, but what happens if Todd Standing's out there pulling a hoax and finds a hair sample and brings it in and the fucker tests legit, right? I mean, we don't know where they'll come from. We have to get the novel started in order to be able to consider anything past page 1, once upon a time. Then where do you go from there, right? I can't say, oh, that guy doesn't fit the right profile of person to get DNA from. Bullshit. Anybody's capable of it. If a fucking mosquito's capable of it, then any human being's capable of it.
True that.
Yeah. So Jeff, we're gonna wind down now, but do you have a setup for a next teaching kind of a video you're gonna be doing soon?
Yeah. Well, actually, it's going to be pretty cool because on the 20th here, next Monday night, I've got my partner Doug Hychek joining me. We're going to talk in depth about Ledge of Meat Science 2. I've got a lot of people asking, how did the ultimate betrayal, the end of the research project happen? What happened with that? And we're going to share a little bit with that. I can't share all the details of it yet, unfortunately, but it's I share enough of it to answer some questions. It will be a show where I should come back and share with you what happened, because I think you guys have been pretty familiar with how this has happened in other areas of research. And that's that if you fly too close to the sun, certain people pay attention. And you can look at something and say, I'm expecting in conclusion either to be A or B, and you get tunnel focused on, did you get what you were looking for or didn't you? And you don't understand the other option, the C, none of the above, that can occur because something really freaking crazy happened in the end of this researching. And I think I look back on it and I still just shake my head like, what the fuck happened here, But I'm going to tell you, I don't care what you're researching. There are people who will get too close to the sun, meaning they're getting too close to the truth, that there are people out there who have an interest in you not getting that close. They don't care if everybody hovers around, but when somebody tries to really get close, something happens. I've heard this all the time with other people, and I thought, fuck it, it ain't gonna happen to us. And I'll share the details at some point, but the number of things that happened and the order they happened in is just, I kind of lived in this bubble like that shit won't happen to me. But it wasn't just me, it was our whole effort that kind of got skewed a little bit here. So that's about all I can tell you. I apologize because that probably made one question turn into 1,000 questions. But
No. So Connor,
here's the limitations I have. I don't know how much of this may make it to the LMS2 documentary or even another whole documentary on this itself. And until we really decipher that over the next couple of weeks, I don't know how much we can just throw out there, right? You know what I mean? But I do want to offer an explanation that people can digest and understand as far as how the whole thing ended. And so we'll probably cover a little bit of that with Doug on Monday night. And then the following Monday night on the 27th is when I have our DNA specialist on, and we approach everything we talked about tonight, but at even a higher nerd level, to where some of us are going to be like, whoa, hey, it's too much. But if you really want to delve into what DNA is capable of and what it isn't, you got to listen to that last episode we do in December. So
that's awesome. I can't wait. I'm a nerd on that stuff. I'm diving in. I want to learn everything I can. Yeah. But Connor, what do you got going on? I know you got a lot of things going on. What do you got going on?
Yes, I do got a lot going on. First of all, though, I appreciate you trying to put out my link, but Bigfoot Anon, youtube.com/Bigfoot Odyssey.
What? I did that?
I'll be at 40,000 subscribers, though, this time next year.
Hold on.
Check us on that.
Hold on. How the hell did I do that? Hold on.
I'm only 39,750.
I didn't do that. Holy shit.
It's snowballs, man.
I can't believe I did that.
But while you're correcting that, just today, I submitted a couple clips for this Mothman documentary that's being based out of Ohio and West Virginia. And today is the 64th anniversary of the bridge falling in Point Pleasant. So all of you guys, do your Mothman research. Incredible story. And now he's being seen in New York and Chicago. So set your calendars, guys. I am also very excited to be a speaker at the roundtable at the Florida Bigfoot Conference in January. I'm really pumped about that. I'm going to be part of the Bigfoot Odyssey 168 expedition. We just had a team meeting. Chris Reinhardt, BF Bud, Tim T, Johnny Two Bear, a lot of cool people, man. It's going to all come together, and I'm really excited because I've been on both sides of the screen and in the crew on documentaries, so I feel like I'm going to bring an abundance of energy and Florida Bigfoot skunk ape knowledge, plus some stuff, camera-wise and documentary-wise, maybe that my vision and a little bit of experience could help. But Sunday, I'm going hiking at Torreya State Park. Hopefully, we're going to be filming with Jack McClellan and Tristan from Hidden Relief. Tomorrow, I'm going to be on Caucasian Sasquatch, the podcast show on YouTube. Super excited. I've also been popping around on Paranormal Chop Shop with Chad Smith and, of course, Mel. It's awesome seeing what Spaced Out Radio is doing. I'm going to be on Spaced Out Radio early January. Of course, everybody check out my TikTok. It is blowing up. I'm almost at 30,000 followers. So it's amazing, talking and speaking to the web and the army of paranormal gurus out there. And then just people who are just really novices in the topic that just want to see footage and different famous clips. So, of course, if I'm sharing 100 pictures, a percentage of them are going to be debunked. But we've heard a lot of stuff debunked, and I can debunk a lot of stuff that people live by. So let's all just stay in our lane and try to spread awareness and grow this spider web of love and knowledge and just this paranormal reality, because we have a branch to the creator in the sky, in these other freaking planets or extra continents, whatever you believe. We are a lot closer, and we are alive during this time. And if you believe that conspiracies don't exist, then open your freaking eyes. But everybody in this chat is here for the right reasons, and I definitely appreciate Gypsy for having an awesome platform, and Jeff for being so open-minded that you never cease to amaze me, however the phrase goes. But like, you always have that open-mindedness to it that I love to appreciate, and it's definitely inspiration to me, because I try to approach everything with just a blank slate and see how it can absorb. Nothing is right or wrong. It's just is. And if it's right for me, it's going to bounce and absorb in, or it's going to bounce out. So, of course, I just love these late nights, past midnight for me and Jeff in the East Coast. But I'm just really excited to get after it in 2022. And as you guys know, I'm full energy and blasting straight forward. So I know the Minnesota Twins are repping up there, but best believe the Tampa Bay Devil Rays are repping down here in the Sunshine State.
I'm actually liking the 8:30 time, because it's harder for people to come in the morning because everybody's at work, and it's funner at night because you got more people coming in. You get to see more people in the chat. So I think I'm going to continue.
I've got like 15 people that have YouTube channels that I love to follow, right? There's only 7 nights a week, dude. And some of them have multiple shows a week, right? They do Tuesday and Thursday or whatever.
That's why
I look at it. If you can pop into that later time slot, you're going to pick up a lot of them strays that there's nobody really feeding that time slot at that point.
Yeah. And
everybody's on at 7 Eastern or 8 Eastern, They're done by the time you're coming on.
Yeah, no, I like it because, Mongolian is usually Tuesday and Thursday, and Chasing Shanji's usually starts 2.5 hours before I do. So, I'm not like stepping on anybody's toes. I will eventually be doing some morning shows again. But letting you guys know, tomorrow I got tickets. I am going to go see the new Spider-Man Multiverse. I haven't done shows on the Horror Talk because I actually received a strike and stuff where it wasn't allowing me to do a live show on my Horror Talk channel. That's why there hasn't been any live talks about movies.
You flew too close to the sun.
But it is released. I could do live shows again. So tomorrow night, I don't know when I get back from the Spider-Man, I'll let you guys know my opinion. Is the multiverse worth it in that movie? Beyond that, and what's cool, when I decided to do a show about DNA, I went to Connor and go, Connor, I got to get a hold of Jeff. He told me to find him on Facebook. And every time I ask Jeff to come on, he's come on. I mean, Jeff's like, yeah, we'll do it.
Well, there's one of the reasons why I do that is I learned, I don't hide the fact that my biggest mentor is really Doug Hychek. I mean, he's not just my research partner. He was the one who really got me inspired to chase after what I've been chasing after. And as big as he is, several hundred episodes of Monster Quest, produced LMS2. He's got a resume that's 100 documentaries long. And yet you can find him on Facebook and send him a message here in 5 minutes if you want. The reason why he's accessible is he wants to be accessible.
That's awesome.
How if somebody gets evidence, say, what do I do with it? If you can't reach people like him, what are you going to do, right? Yeah. And so I look at it and say, well, for the same reason, I'll put myself out there. I'm not afraid to use my real name. I don't have some pseudonym like Crazy Horse or some shit that I call myself.
Jeff, there is people out there. When they get a certain big enough, they won't even talk to you.
No, I get it.
I had a friend that had another channel. I had on my channel. Good. He gets 40,000. He gets signed with this one company, whatever. Drops me like shit. Like never talks to me again. Like what?
Mm-hmm.
And there's people like that. You got to be careful. There's people like that.
I tell you, I look at it like this and say, when I look at who's following me on Facebook, or I look at who's subscribed to my channel, I appreciate everybody who shows up in my chats. I appreciate everybody who subscribes. if
Isn't it
somebody looks at it and doesn't see value in it and doesn't subscribe, I'm fine with that too, because honestly, they probably weren't going to bring anything to the discussion that would have been useful. So,
Yeah.
you know, if I cap out at 500 people or 500,000 people, I really don't give a shit. It doesn't matter to me.
Now next
I just
week,
want people in the conversation, in the chat, and the guests that I get on to bring something to the table. That's it.
now next week is the week of Christmas, so I don't know what everybody's plans are. You know, I'm checking it out. I know I got an email from a good friend, the Vault of Nightmares. Vault Keeper wants to come on my channel. He said he's willing to just pick a day and stuff, so I'm working that out. I know next week is Christmas week. A lot of people are gone, so I'll work that stuff out. So Vault of Nightmares will be coming on the channel, and I just got to figure out what's the best day, because it's Christmas week. It's crazy week, right? Everybody's gone. Everybody goes to families, so who knows who's. So beyond that, guys, we're gonna end the show here. I want to thank my two wonderful, awesome guests for coming on, and hopefully you guys enjoyed it. And Connor, do you actually know when the Void Cat will be accessible to people by any chance?
Nope, I don't even know, bro. We have so many different festivals and fun things that we want to submit it to, that if we put it on YouTube or a public domain, we're automatically disqualified. And usually, you know, movies don't have the dumb actor being all loudmouth about it, talking, you know, the whole production. So, you know, people are expecting it, but I've been talking about it since day one. You know, I know it doesn't provide any answers, but it's a long process, guys, between it being made and it being submitted to a bunch of festivals and then it being public domain. So hopefully in 2022, but if we keep, you know, getting submitted to these festivals and coming in first or second place, who knows, man? But I definitely want it to be on Vimeo soon or something. But if anybody really wants to see it, honestly, just contact me and I'll shoot you the link. The private link's got like 250 views. Jack's like, bro, Connor, who you sending this to? I'm like, I didn't send it to anybody. They all hacked my phone. But yes, this is an awesome prototype of the DVD case, The Void Cat. It's a very cool movie. It's about Dogman and the Splinter Cat and a cool curse. And then, of course, while I'm ranting, Zillafoot. This is a horrible kaiju movie, but we had a lot of fun making it. My character is very authentic. I'm a cryptid research officer. I pretty much was speaking like I'm speaking now, and the military ushered me out. They said, dude, you're probably right, but you still got to go. Did very well online because I guess SRS Cinemas is like worshipped over in Asia. Now it actually got a widespread release, so it's in Best Buy, FYE, and Walmart. So it's very goofy and it's very fun. But yeah, you guys can check me out on there, and it's awesome just to combine different genres and niches. But I know a lot of people try to throw me under the bus for that and say, oh, you don't know what's blurred reality. But as me and Eric have already showed and told, guys, the establishment puts the illusion out there right in the movies, and they tell us what they're going to do. That's part of the contract of the Illuminati and these dark forces. They have to literally provide the blueprint to us, and we have to accept it. So if you could read in between the lines and see these movies and these radio broadcasts and these fake debunks, and then the fake space missions by the evil billionaires, and then if you can communicate with your kitty cats and they have quartz in their pineal gland, then you can tap into the Egyptian wavelengths and you can get somewhere. But you have to document it when you first wake up before you pick up your phone. But guys, I just love combining the pseudoscience with the real science, and that's what it's all about. To get somewhere, we have to listen to the folklore, to the present day encounters, and then let's find the whoops, the howls, the blood, the castings, and all of it. It comes in so many different angles, and encounters show up in many different forms. So yes, Sasquatch is real, and he has already been proven. But I think DNA will be, on the grandstand, because like Jeff said, these scientists and these universities and the establishment, they know, they're watching this. They're the ones who striked our channel on the last one. We're getting somewhere, and all these other camps are getting somewhere. And for all the loudmouth voices, there's 1,000 other families that are having close encounters with these creatures. So we just have to widen our lenses, you know. And me, I'm lucky that I am wide and open-minded, and so I get a lot of these reports and crazy fun encounters sent to me, and it's my duty to share them. So I'm just going to keep on keeping on, and I can't wait to see 2022 for the wild man.
I'll give you something that you can close with, and this is something that you heard it here first, but you can use it, Connor, because you will use this. You know why there's so much stock in those cave walls all around the country of pictures that were drawn 10,000 years ago before the internet, before any intercontinental communication? It's because they didn't have fucking comic books to draw them in.
Yep.
I like it.
They had to draw them on cave walls.
And just one last thing, guys. Just one last thing. If you guys ever want to find a good channel, I was so worried that my guy, something happened to him. I sent him emails and all that. And when he came out with this video, my heart was like, my boy's back. My boy's back. And who I'm talking about is, if you guys ever want to hear little UFO stories, he's an awesome man. He's an awesome guy. He's from Grandpa's world. He's like in his 70s and 80s, right? And all he does is tells 2-minute UFO stories. He has the coolest shirts, the Goonies, Mardi Gras. This man, I fucking love this man. I have him on my channel. He's the greatest guy. He still works. He still puts food on his table for his wife. And I just love it because it doesn't matter what age you are. You can still do a channel. He's not huge. He doesn't get, hundreds of views. He gets like 10 views, 4 views. But guys, if you ever want to check out a fun little channel, he tells you all UFO alien stories that he has heard through his life. It's a great channel. Trust me, take a look, listen to him. He's my recommendation. I love this guy. And I just love seeing all ages. Doesn't matter if you're 80. Fuck it. I'm still going to go on there.
Doesn't matter how young you are either. My son has a gaming channel that he started, and I have never told him that I started a YouTube channel. I'm waiting till I can hit 1,000 subscribers, and I'm going to walk into his bedroom and show him my YouTube channel, and he's going to be like, what the fuck?
That's awesome. So beyond that, guys, I'll see everybody later. I'll see you next time.